Happy hobby. I'm David Gonis. And if you're a sports card collector and you're working on a limited budget, that's exactly what we do here on our YouTube channel at David Gonis and on our Happy Hobby Sports Card podcast. Today is a very special day. We have a very special guest, a guy back from my fantasy days, but also back from my days when I was writing at The Athletic, Michael Salfino. How are you doing, Mike?
Very good. Very excited about this. Always
Oh,
looking
good.
forward to talking about cards.
Oh man, I'm super excited. I've known you for, you're the vintage guy. Like as far as I've known of you. Like we both wrote
Yes.
cards and stuff, but your knowledge is a little beyond me, which is why I'm super happy to have you on here.
And
And Michael,
ironically, I write the new cards, ironically.
yeah, right. I was
So,
just gonna say you actually do write for Topps Heritage and
yeah.
Topps Archives currently, but you also still cover fantasy sports and collectibles for the Athletic and with the Wall Street Journal. You've been with them since 2016, right?
Yeah, well, that's when I started, right? I'm no longer writing for them, but I
Oh,
started
gotcha.
writing about collectibles in 2016. I wrote there's like a documentary on one of the channels
Oh,
about
that's
the
awesome.
explosion of vintage cards, and they used a guy from the New York Times that wrote his article in 2018 where he compared vintage cards to other investment vehicles. I beat him by like 2 years. It's just that the
Nice.
producers never didn't think like they probably were like, who was ahead of the pandemic curve? Let's look to see if anybody wrote about this in
Oh, that's awesome.
2018. And meanwhile, I wrote about it where I compared Mickey Mantle cards in a 10-year time span to every other major investment vehicle. It was like the
Wow.
most read article in the Wall Street Journal that year online.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. Wow.
that's pretty much when I got back into the hobby, like seriously, back from my childhood when I was also a vintage collector.
And that makes sense too. The Wall Street Journal, investments, it makes sense that something like that would do
Yeah.
well in that because it's something different too. It's not a regular asset. This is a little different.
Yeah. And it was like
Now,
your mom threw away your Mickey Mantle cards, basically, was the
yeah.
gist of the article. Yeah.
Someone told me the other day they had a great line that your grandmother is to blame for junk wax, the junk wax era, because your grandmother threw away your dad's Mickey Mantles.
Yes.
And when you came along having cards, he was like, don't you ever throw those out, whatever you do. So it makes sense that nobody threw them out and they
Yeah.
just kept
Well,
producing them.
something my father told me is never collect anything that people think is valuable when it's new.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Well, that goes against a lot of the ripping and stuff that happens
Well,
nowadays,
but
but
but I mean,
it's understandable.
there's manufacturing scarcity now, but
Absolutely.
that would
Yeah.
have made you avoid the junk wax era, basically,
Right. Oh,
when
yeah.
everybody
Right.
was
That makes sense.
had that expectation that, they were
So,
sitting on a gold mine.
right. Right. So currently you write for Tops. You do the card backs, right? The
Yeah,
write ups on the card
cartoons,
backs.
card back. I don't draw the cartoons, but I write the
That's
cartoon copy.
awesome. Holy cow. That's so
Trivia,
cool.
the 72 Heritage theme set had uh non-player specific trivia questions,
Oh,
just about
yeah.
general baseball.
Yeah.
So I had to replicate that for the
Cool.
72 set, but there were like 900 cards. So I had to come up with like
Oh
900
man,
trivia
holy
questions.
smokes. Wow. Well, that's cool. So we have a Happy Hobby Sports Cards chat for our newsletter. We have a lot of guys in there that chat about cards and stuff. And one of them is a former, he designed card designs for Tops.
Yep.
And another guy does sports card photography. He's had some James Wood pictures in this year's release. So to have you in here, we're almost got the full complete
Yeah. We could
manufacturing
we could
company
start we
together.
could start up a company.
I would
Uh
be superfluous. I would not be used at all. So
but yeah, that it's really interesting doing the all the stuff for Tops. I mean, I just love it. Like I've got my bylines in big places, obviously, but there's nothing I enjoy more than writing the card backs. I mean, to me, it's kind of like if you would have told me when I was 7 that I would be doing that, I would be like, I would have been like, I have the coolest job in the world. So the fact that I'm able to do that now is just
yeah,
crazy.
right.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So today we're going to talk vintage cards, obviously. Um, we're going to talk vintage card rankings. Like, what do you think of the players that really are a step above the other players? We're also going to talk about vintage card players for people with a limited budget, which is what
Yeah.
this website or this YouTube channel is all about. And I love the list that you put together. It's very cool. They're the real guys. These are the real
Yeah, I'm right.
cards.
I'm writing an article for it's filed, but it's kind of evergreen. I don't know exactly when it's going to be published soon, but it's basically I came up with uh the baker's dozen, the blue chip baker's dozen.
Yeah.
So it's like 13 players. I didn't do hockey, which I could have if I did it would have been Bobby Orr,
Yeah.
but I covered the other three sports and it was, eight baseball players, three football players, and two basketball players in the vintage era, which is tops like 51 to 73. I kind of got that idea from you.
Oh,
And
cool. Well, I'll
and
take
the whole conceit is basically a lot of people avoid vintage because it seems so broad and intimidating to somebody who's not
sure.
a sports historian, where
Right.
there's just so many Hall of Famers. Where do you start? But really, it's a very, very condensed hobby. Like if you focus on these 13 players, you pretty much have the cream of the crop. And then obviously you can do things from there. I collect the vintage rookies. I collect sets.
Oh,
I
wow.
collect other players that are just favorites of
Yeah.
mine that don't make this list, like Tom Seaver.
I was gonna say you're
Uh,
a Mets fan, right? If
yeah.
I recall. Yeah. Cool.
So,
Cool.
it's not to say that that's all you should do, but
Sure.
if you do this, and if you start at these lower price points, you pretty much have a representative vintage collection where you have all of the major players that people that will always the idea is that if you could see any of these cards below auction prices for the grade. And if the card is at least average for the grade, you should
Right.
just buy it.
Just get it.
That's pretty much like any of these players that I mentioned, but we're going to focus just on the $100
Yeah. Yeah.
options and that. And there's no Jackie Robinson because there's no $100 Jackie Robinson cards.
Makes
That
sense.
those days have long
Yeah.
passed. The best
Right.
I could do is a one point. You can get a 1.556 with good eye appeal for like maybe 300.
I have a an authentic 56, and I'm happy
Yeah,
with it. But exactly, those are tough to
yeah,
get. Those are tough to.
yeah. It's a beautiful
It
card.
looks expensive. Yeah, it's a beautiful card. So now, also at the end, you're going to share some of your personal collection, some of your favorites from your personal collection.
Well, sure. I could mention some of the ones. Like I
Okay.
have them, like they're behind me in binders. I'm like old
Oh, I
school
got you.
with, but I'll show them. So
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
you might have to pause it while I dig
I
through a
can do
couple.
that. That
But
works.
yeah,
That works. All right. So let's first talk about these vintage player card rankings. Now, the reason this all came up, this whole interview and everything really came up, I had planned to text you at some point, like, hey, can I get you on at some point? You saved me the trouble. You emailed me about the Dandy Dozen, which is a video I'd done on YouTube a while back, kind of
yes,
listing the 12, who I had thought of the 12 best players to collect from each era. So it was like the vintage era, then from like
yeah. And you did all the
73.
sports.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Then
yep,
from like 73 to junk wax era and then forward and then, the current player, something like that.
yeah.
But
It was
anyway, so
great.
you'd mentioned you're like, it was a good job, but you're like, yeah, the rankings. So you did your own rankings, which is pretty awesome. So I thought we could talk about that.
Sure.
First, obviously, the first guy is Mickey Mantle. And I wanted to mention this because this article is currently on The Athletic. You talk about a Mickey Mantle, a 52 Mickey Mantle that a guy won in a pinochle game. Can you share that story?
Yeah, in 1980, I believe. He was playing Pinochle and he was a very good Pinochle player. And he was somebody owed him $100 and they said, would you take this card instead of the $100? And at the time, I looked up a 1983 price guide. At the
Uh-huh.
time, the 52 Mantle was worth $300. So it turns out this is the only card the guy had. Flash forward, over
40
40
years.
years,
Yeah.
and his grandson contacts me and says that his father, who now has possession of the card, his mother and his father, have an autographed 1951 Mickey Mantle, as a lot of novice uh, card people do.
Sure.
They think that the year is the last year on the card,
Oh,
as
right. Oh, I didn't
opposed
catch that.
to
Yeah, you said 51. I didn't know if you slipped, but that makes more
yeah.
sense.
And plus, they thought that the
The
facsimile
facsimile.
autograph on the
Yeah.
marquee was a real autograph. So
Mm,
when I saw it, I was just like, 99% chance that this is a fake Mantle.
sure.
But the fact that it was poorly centered, accrued into its favor. That's one of the tests. Obviously, if you smell, feel, shine the light through the back of the card, you could pretty much rule out the forgeries. But
Oh, interesting.
the only thing that I could go by is the actual, since I wasn't in physical proximity to the card,
Right.
was to actually go through some of the tests, which I did, and it passed all of them for the type 1 mantle. There's two types. The type 1 is the more desirable one.
Oh,
So I thought it was real. I have contacts, obviously, through to Fanatics, formerly PWCC. So I contacted the person that I knew there, and he was like, "We agree with you that this is probably real." So they got it graded. It came back at 2.5, and the more I guess the
2.5. Wow.
but it had
It was even better.
definite five
Better
qualities
eye appeal.
for
Yeah.
2.5 if you look at the card. So it
Yeah.
sold for
Wow.
56,800, I think, which is above market for 2.5 as it should have. It was like at 35,000 before they got into the extended bidding. I knew it was going to go up well past that. So, I feel like I gave birth. It's like those old stories where the cabbies like give birth to a child in the back of the cab.
Yeah.
And I feel like I gave birth to a 52 mantle. So,
That's awesome. That's a great story. I like that a lot. All right. So Mantle, number one. Number two, who you got?
well, Jackie Robinson, of course, like pretty much like, I mean, I think he's right there with Mantle in terms of um, investment grade, blue chip. Like, nothing is going to ever happen to the value. The value of Jackie Robinson cards is only going to go up.
Yeah,
Then
there's historic context there that Mantle is more of a historic from a card perspective, but Jackie Robinson historic from a history standpoint.
exactly right. And then Will,
Non-card collectors would be interested in Jackie Robinson.
yeah, he transcends
Yeah,
sports.
there you
Yeah.
go.
So Willie Mays, the first black superstar, obviously, and just, arguably the greatest player ever.
Mhm.
Ted Williams, Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, Nolan Ryan, and Sandy Koufax. And that's it. Those are the only ones that I feel like, you could make a case for other players that maybe they should be on the list, but they're not. You
Yeah,
don't understand why they're not. A lot of players just don't have enough cards. Like you can't, Bill Russell would be in that era, but he has two cards and one of them is pretty
right.
much,
Unattainable.
unattainable.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't really include him. But that's when we got to basketball. So in football, it was only three. It was in order. It was Jim Brown, Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas, and then in
Okay,
basketball,
so now we're getting into so those were just the rankings that you had initially sent me. Oh, and then you did the rankings for football, right? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
That so
Jim Brown.
football was those three. Just the three
Jim
players
Brown,
basically.
Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas.
Yep, and then basketball just Wilt and Kareem. Now remember, only the vintage era I'm talking about. So I'm
Yeah.
cutting it off at 73. I'm a stickler for vintage stops when Topps started issuing all the cards in one series. No longer vintage.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that
Oh,
was that was
that's a good rule.
1974.
I didn't know that that was even a that makes sense though. That's cool. That's good. So
Yeah.
73 forward or 73 back?
Oh, 73 back. But
Yeah.
the Topps era obviously starts in 1951.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. All right. So then let's start talking about these vintage cards that are someone could get for $100 each. Mickey Mantle, you have this for obviously that's the big guy. So let's talk about
That's
his
a
stuff.
tough one, but I did it.
Yeah.
I feel very good about this.
So what is it? The 1964 Topps Giant
Yeah,
in
a lot of
SEC
people there.
five.
There's been a lot of fines for these cards, a lot of vending fines where the cards are pretty much in pristine condition, a lot of warehouse fines. There's a zillion of them. Okay, I'm not going to. There's 7,000 in higher grade if you get a five. Okay, that's a lot.
Oh.
But as I point out in the article, at the time that I wrote this article, there were 25,406 Victor Wambayamas in
Right.
PSA 10.
Yeah.
That's just prism based, non-autograph. So,
Yeah.
and they're going for about the same amount. Those were like $80 each. So you can get a Mickey Mantle. Like I guarantee you this, Mickey Mantle's not going to have any more bad years. So,
Yeah. Right. Right. He's not going to get blood clots either. He's not going to have injuries. He's not going to have all this other stuff. Like, yeah,
exactly.
understood. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's not
and
going to
the
happen.
thing is, it is a mantle. It's a huge card. Okay, like it's not. Mantle was a handsome guy. Maybe it's not his best looking card. He looks a little sweaty on the card, but it's a tops card. It's got a front and back. It's oversized. You could get it in a 5 with the eye appeal of a 7 in an auction for $100. Like I just
Wow,
don't see how you can go wrong there.
that's cool. That's awesome. All right, so his counterpart, so to speak, Willie Mays for $100. That's his 73 tops. You're a Mets fan, so that makes
I am a
sense.
Mets fan, but I do think that here's the thing. I have bought this card so many times. Whenever I
Really?
see one that's fairly priced, I buy it. Before the Super Bowl, the Saturday before the Super Bowl, there was a show in Parsippany. I live in New Jersey, and it was like, 90% Pokemon, and the rest was like vintage. Well, maybe like 50% Pokemon, 45% vintage, 45% new cards, and then 5% vintage.
Wow.
But one guy had a PSA 8 centered maze, which I already had a centered PSA 8 maze. I
Uh,
recommended the card in an article on the Athletic when I bought that card for $98. And so I said, you cannot go wrong getting this card in an 8 for $100 basically. And now it's like it should really be about 350 to 400 centered. And this one,
wow.
I got him down to 310. And so I just bought it. And, you know, basically, uh, at that $100 price point, you can get a nice 7, especially in SGC
Oh,
and
wow.
centered. In the back, kind of look at the back. These cards are wonky with the printing process where the backs can be like badly off-centered, even if the front is pretty good. Um, but you can get a really nice centered one for $100 and a 6. And I believe that card is always going to have appeal because it's Maze's only Mets card, and there's a zillion
Mays, it's
Mets.
Mets. Like, yeah,
Yes.
that's great. Something I learned the other day, a few months ago. Why is the Mets colors the Mets colors? Do you know
You,
that?
oh, of course. Yeah.
Those are your true Mets
It's
fans.
because it's, half Giants, half Dodgers.
Yeah, yeah. I only learned that a few months ago. I was like, how did I not
Well,
put that together?
when I was in third grade in Lake Hiawatha, maybe second grade, second or third, probably second. I asked my teacher, "What's a Met?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I know what a tiger is. I know what a cub is. Okay, I even know what a brave is. I sort of know what a Yankee is, but what's a Met? Why are they called the Mets? What is a Met?" And she had no idea what I was talking about. That's when I lost faith in public education. And then it turned out it was the Metropolitans. And in her defense, like you couldn't like look it up on your phone.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's true. Right.
yeah. So,
That's funny. All right, so we'll move on to the third one, Ted Williams. So he has
yeah,
8 tops cards you mentioned, and he
yeah,
shares one
yeah.
with Ted
That
Kluszewski.
includes the
Big
double
Clue.
header
Yeah.
and an insert, which is the card with Klaczewski, which you could also get. But to me, that's almost more of a Klaczewski card than a Williams card, even though it's
Oh,
Williams. Williams is front facing on the card, but he's smaller in proportion to the
oh,
two
gotcha.
images.
I got you.
I mean, that's fine if you want to go that route. I
Sure.
would go with the in a uh PSA or SGC 5. I see no difference. I will always take the SGC discount if there is one. But I think it's a super attractive card. Now, it was triple printed.
Now you're talking
Um
about which card?
the all
The
his
58
1958
All Star,
Topps All-Star card.
which are
It's
beautiful.
it's a beautiful
Gorgeous
card,
set.
and I think
Gorgeous
that
subset.
it gives you Williams for $100, like in a
Yeah.
5. And I think you could always get a 5 where people will look at it and say, why isn't that a 7? And there will be technical reasons why it's a 5,
Uh,
but it will have the eye appeal of a 7 if you're
hmm.
patient enough.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's good. All right, so the next one, Roberto Clemente, $100. You have it in here as a centered 63 Fleer Clemente,
Yeah, a lot of
which
people are kind of unfamiliar with that set. I think it's underpriced, so I think you can get a really nice 4 in SGC or PSA for about $100 in auctions. Now, always the buy it now price is always going to be more than the
sure
auctions. It's crazy, like the
it's for the
disparity.
impatient like myself. Like I can't.
But always offer the auction price.
Oh yeah, absolutely
Even
offer.
if they
Yeah.
say they're not taking best offers, definitely do it if they're taking best offers.
Oh, so you shoot them a message through the
Shoot them a
system.
message
Oh, that's cool.
and
That's a
just
great
say,
tip.
look,
Yeah.
the last 4 auctions have averaged this price, so here's my offer.
Yeah. I
and a
like
lot of
that.
times they'll take it. So, you can't go wrong. I'm one of
Yeah.
the biggest cards that I bought when I first started writing for Topps in 2019. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was bored. And my dream card at the time was the rookie Namath. And
Wow.
somebody had one for $2,000 at the time when most of them were being listed for like 25 or $2,600 in a five, like a centered
Wow.
five. And I was like, wow, that's pretty much a fair price. I wonder what his bottom line is. So I was like, I'll offer him 1,600 and see what he comes back with. I wake up the next morning, he accepted. I
Accepted.
almost crapped myself
That's
because now
awesome.
all of a sudden I have to pay $1,600 for that. Like, I can't tell my wife.
Right.
She would seriously, like,
Yeah.
she might have divorced me if she knew that I spent $1,600 on a card back then.
Yeah,
Now she's
there's
cool with
something to be said. Like the excitement over winning it is there, but also the relief over sometimes not winning cards is a good thing too. Yeah, I get
And
that.
then I told a dealer friend of mine, and he was like, "Well, yeah, of course, an offer of 1,600 on 2,000 could be accepted. I mean, you're basically
Wow.
paying, like 90%.
That's cool. That's good to know. I like that. And that's
Well,
63
I
tops.
guess you're
That
paying 80%.
yeah, there you go.
Um,
63 tops. That or 63 Fleer was they had the cookie, right?
they
Instead
did,
of
yeah.
gum.
Tops's rule legally was that nobody
They were
could
the
release a card with
gum.
candy,
Candy,
period.
candy. Gotcha.
So
Oh, so
that's
they
why they
went with
had
the
to go to the
cookie.
cookie. Um, but I think it's a beautiful card. Like I say in the article, Clementi's so handsome. Almost all of his cards look gorgeous.
Yeah,
And
agreed. Yeah.
to
Same with
make it
Mantle. Like
63.
all of Mantle's cards, it's tough to find an ugly
Exactly.
photo.
Yep. So like a peak, you're getting peak career Clementi for $100 there.
Mm, cool. Yeah, and that's a historic set. Like I said, they got sued and they were done
Yeah.
for a little while. Okay, so the next one, again, one of the. Would you agree the Mount Rushmore, Clemente, Hank Aaron? Well, you got Ted Williams in there and Jackie Robinson. I
Yeah,
was gonna
there's a
say,
little bit too many. It's like
yeah, I guess so.
two
Right.
Mount Rushmores probably, or
So
three.
yeah, so Hank Aaron for $100. You have his 66 tops NL batting leaders
Yeah, see,
featuring
I got a little creative here because I think this is the most underrated card in the hobby because it has Mays, Aaron, and Clementi
yeah.
in a
When
three-panel
else?
front.
When else can you
Uh,
get that? Yeah, and it's
and
three verticals, right? Like it's not
uh,
like one up here and two down here, like how
yeah,
some
exactly. Well,
three
the
verticals.
card is
Landscape.
it's a horizontal
Yeah,
card, but yes, they each have an equal share
yeah,
of
that's
the
an awesome
of the
card.
card for the three batting leaders, and it's just a beautiful card. I mean, you're getting three Mount Rushmore players for the price of one, and you could get this card seriously, like in I think in a five, I said, for
Under 100.
although yeah,
Yeah.
for about $100. Like maybe you have to go to 110. It's a tough card to find centered. You might have to give a little bit. You may have to pay a little bit more, maybe 120 if you want
Mm,
a centered five, but it's
yeah.
well worth it. Always pay the center premium. That's my overriding advice in all for
I
all
love hearing
cards.
this because I've been doing things wrong, and really my priority is always to get the card. Like I want the card, and so in doing so, to me centering isn't like corners can be controlled. Centering can't ever. That's the top's fault. That's
Yes,
whoever
it's Topps'
produces.
fault. Right.
So to me, I'm like, if somebody took care of the card and the corners are beautiful, like that meant a lot more to me. With that said, if I want to build a collection that continues to build value, getting centered cards, the most centered you can find them, that's a good way to do it. That's
And
smart,
and
smart thing to do.
I sometimes will violate that rule. Like I bought at the time I paid really decent money for a raw 57 Koufax, almost
Wow.
impossible to find centered. But the thing about that 57 set is the registration of the players is so wonky. Like sometimes it's great, sometimes it's the first. It's you pointed out on your excellent episode about the 57 set, the
Oh,
first
thank you. Oh
first
yeah,
set
first
with the
photos, right?
color photos, right?
Yeah.
So this had absolutely perfect image and registration and surface
And this was
and
for which
corners.
card?
The 57 Koufax.
Koufax.
So,
Koufax. Gotcha.
it was off centered, but I didn't care. I bought it.
That's cool.
I also have a packed fresh rookie Fleer Oscar Robertson that's not centered well, typical of
Wow.
set. But it's if the card has outstanding other qualities and I'm getting a fair price relative to it not being centered, I will buy it.
Gotcha. Cool. Cool. All right. So Nolan Ryan next. Another Met
Can't
collector.
go wrong with Ryan. I guess the Met ones kind of fly off the shelves,
Yeah.
but I think the 72 card is so hot right now. Like I cannot believe the price of the
That's
72
the
card.
his face right in the picture, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's his first Angels card. Um, and it's an iconic set because it has that total like
Oh, it's cool.
I wrote in the article that Doc Ellis famously threw an a no-hitter on LSD. I think after he threw the no-hitter on LSD, he designed the 1972
Nice.
top sets because it's totally psychedelic. Like I love it. So you could get that card in a centered 4 or 5 for that price. And I think it's a pretty safe card given the appreciation of the higher grade Ryans in recent years in that set. It used to be only really the Mets Ryans appreciated to that
Oh,
degree,
oh, yeah.
but now we're seeing that in the I'm not saying to not buy
Sure.
non-vintage era Ryans, but
Yeah.
the 72 and 73 Ryans are very, very safe.
Yeah. If you're gonna collect, it's for our audience, like Nolan Ryan's nice because you can chip away at his player checklist by getting the cheap ones in the 80s and the late 70s, and then when you can buy these the expensive earlier cards, then it's nice. But meanwhile you're chipping away, building up your full Nolan Ryan collection. I liked you had a pro tip in here. Oh, go ahead, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, no. What was my pro tip?
You had your pro tip: cards with the half grade bump tend to be more well
Oh yeah.
centered than cards in whole grades. Never knew that. That's
Like
pretty cool.
obviously it depends on the card because there could be other superior qualities of the card that give it the half
Sure.
grade bump. But generally speaking, you will find a much higher percentage of well-centered cards with the point with the half grade than you
Yeah.
will with the whole grade.
Oh, that's cool. That's good to know. Okay, and the last one in the baseball section, Sandy Koufax.
Yep, like I said, the left arm of God, like it's never going to change. Nobody's going to have 4 seasons like he did, from 63 to 65. I noted 1,192 innings, 1.86 ERA, 97 wins, 1,228 Ks, 0.91 WHIP. I mean, just never going to happen again. And for $100, you could get for some reason, I double checked this. You can do it. You can get a really nice 1959 Koufax before he became even, it's
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah, it
vintage
took a few
Koufax
years. Sorry?
because like Koufax wasn't even really
Mm-mm.
remotely Koufax at
Yep.
that point. And with that beautiful yellow background with the white borders, you could get it decently centered. I mean, that's really doable for $100.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. And something else I read about Koufax, that he was the very first West Coast athlete superstar. Like he was the first athlete superstar.
Mays,
Well, but I guess maybe
but
like
Mays
grown.
came. He was a superstar
Yeah,
already, so I see
right.
what you're saying. Yeah, the
I had
first
read
one
that and
that
I thought
was
that, oh, that makes sense.
sort of homegrown West
Yeah.
Coast. Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly in baseball.
Now let me ask you a question. So you have this as a VGX4, like to get a
Yes.
four. Threes, if I'm not mistaken, in PSA, threes, twos, and ones all essentially mean they have some sort of crease or they have something. Is that
No,
right?
there's many threes that don't have creases.
Oh, for some
Almost
reason I
all of
thought that.
my threes. I have a two. If I showed you my Chamberlain rookie two, which
Yeah.
doesn't have a crease or wrinkle that I can see, I think
Uh,
it has a couple scratches that are imperceptible.
mm,
But the rule with grading, just so you know, is the grading companies will not give a grade more than 1 grade higher than the lowest quality of the card. So my Will Chamberlain has the qualities of a 5 or 6 in every single area except for whatever they decided
surface or whatever.
was
Yeah.
kind of like a 1.
I got
because maybe it does have a scratch, which you can't even really see in the case.
you.
So that's why it's limited to the two. But I bought it as a two. I paid for a two. But the
Right.
fact is, my two is better than
Most twos.
80% of
Yeah,
fives. Never
I
mind
got you.
twos,
That's
because it's
cool.
centered pretty well, which is almost impossible with that set.
Right.
But threes are a sweet spot. Especially pre-war,
Yeah.
or the more expensive cards. Threes are excellent, and you will rarely find a three with a crease. Threes will have wrinkles, maybe if you
Oh,
look
maybe
really
that's what I'm kind
closely,
of thinking of.
but
Yeah.
not creases. Although technically, I think they can. I have a 2.5 50 Jackie Robinson
Uh-huh.
that doesn't have a crease that I can see. I bought that a long time ago for amount
Nice.
of money that I'm almost like embarrassed to say because it's like so low.
Nice. All right, so let's jump to football now. So you have the three guys. Jim Brown first. You have the 64 Philadelphia Jim Brown card.
I love that card because he's in front of a chain link fence kneeling. He looks like he's like in a playground. And behind the chain link fence is a Cadillac. And it's like, what the hell is that car doing there? But that's the card that he won for being the MVP of the league. So he's proud of that card and he wanted it. He was
That's
proud of
cool.
the car and the award, and he wanted it in the picture of, that Philadelphia took for his card that year. So,
Yeah,
I love all the Browns. I don't think you could go wrong with any of them. And in this article, when it runs, I not only did the $100 cards, but I did strata. So it was like 100, 300, and 1,000 plus, or around 1,000, what the recommendation would be. And you know, the 64 Philadelphia Brown in a five, I think you could get it.
and
Um,
Philadelphia is the same company as Fleer, right? If I'm not mistaken. Like I
Pretty
think they,
much.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that
Uh,
lawsuit went on like for like 7 years.
oh yeah, and they
Um,
had 4 years with. They had the NFL or the NFC, what we know now, because of Gale Sayers was in that in
yeah,
Philadelphia.
Topps had the AFL
Right, right.
for a few years in there,
Yeah.
and
So it was like 4 years.
Philadelphia and Fleer had the NFL. Yep.
So it's even more interesting because that Philadelphia Fleer. So there wasn't a 64 tops Jim Brown.
No, there's no
Right.
Jim Brown Topps after 1963.
So that's a big deal considering this isn't a some secondary card. It's just that's the year.
It's the only card that year for
Yeah.
Brown.
Cool.
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah. And the thing is, so what you'll have to do for $100 is either get one that's not great in as far as centering in a five, or a perfectly centered four. Now,
Oh,
personally, I would always go for the perfectly centered four over
good to
the,
know. Yeah, that's
yeah.
cool.
I just think basically it's a half a grade to a grade bump at least
Yeah.
in expected value.
Cool. Cool. All right. So the Joe. Oh, that's an interesting point there then. So half grade bump in value with the better centering.
Yes.
Cool. I like that. Okay, so Joe Namath. Obviously, Joe Namath's an expensive player to buy because you got the New York media, the Jets. He's a high-profile quarterback. You have him with the Joe hat, his last Topps card.
Yeah, what's great about that hat is most of the Topps cards of that era, if they had a player wearing any kind of headwear, they had to like take out the team logo because the Topps only had uh, NFL Players Association rights. They didn't have NFL rights. Fleer had NFL rights, so the Fleer released
The team
team
cards, right?
cards, which are
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like crazy. It's just like the
yeah,
Chiefs blocking a run play, and
yeah,
it's like but they're able to show the Chiefs helmets, which
yeah.
Topps couldn't do. But Topps, I think, very cleverly got around this with Namath because they have him wearing a Joe knit hat that some fan gave him, and it's so like perfect. And
That's
plus, it's
cool.
the last Namath card, and you can get an eight. You might have to push it to $125, but you can get like a pack fresh eight 73 Namath, his last card for $100. It's just
Wow.
crazy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Let's
That's
call it
cool.
125.
All right, we'll
Centered.
do. We'll yeah,
Centered.
save an extra couple weeks. There you go, a week or two. All right, so Giant Unitas, $100. This is the 61 Fleer with the you say the old timey Colts logo.
Yeah, like basically like the actual, Colt
Oh, the
animal.
kick. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and plus I love the pose, which I referenced in the copy that I wrote for The Athletic, where his right shoulder is high above his left shoulder.
Yeah.
So he's got sort of that kind of like big man on campus quarterback pose that I love. And it's a great card. It's a very attractive card, and you could easily get that in a six for $100, and that to me is just like a steal.
That's awesome. Yeah.
There's only
All right.
731 in all grades.
Wow. You would think,
Think
yeah.
about
So
that.
it's weird. Vintage football. I mean, as a fantasy guy too, like we both know, fantasy football brains are different than fantasy baseball brains. They're starting to become a little more number oriented and stuff. But baseball fans, baseball card collectors, there's an appreciation for history that's not in football and basketball the same way it is in baseball.
Well, a lot of it was those sports weren't as popular at the time,
Yeah.
which is one of the big reason why Namath is such a central character in the hobby is that he was the first superstar uh, football player for sure,
Hmm.
and arguably the first superstar athlete like who transcended maybe Ruth probably would qualify
Getting,
too,
yeah,
but
pantyhose
who
commercials. Right. Yeah.
yeah, like who just completely it's just the the girlfriends and wives were just as interested in Namath as the
Yeah.
husbands.
Yeah.
So and plus most of the players wore helmets and nobody really knew who they were unless you were the rare superstar athlete who was a celebrity like Namath, where and Unitas qualifies as well, where people knew, Unitas, everybody uh, pretty much was introduced to Unitas in one of the seminal moments in sports history, which was the advent of the NFL as a televised sport in those playoff championship game victories in 58 and 59 against the Giants. Like that was groundbreaking.
Hmm.
So that before that, nobody really even cared who the
Yeah.
quarterback was that much. After that, it was a quarterback league, but then
It was more
Namath
about
took it
college
to a
football even at that point.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
Namath took that to a whole other level. When he played in the first night game in football
Oh,
history,
wow. Didn't know that.
which was the national championship game between Texas and Alabama that got
Wow.
insane ratings.
Huh.
And then he became a Jet, obviously, and that his contract was record breaking, and he was immediately a media superstar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And basically he made number 12 a thing. Like quarterbacks, quarterbacks now are identified with number 12 because of Namath. And
Hmm.
Namath, I talk about a lot of people give Namath crap for not being worthy of his stature, but
Yeah.
he was a two-time AFL MVP. He was the all-time AFL quarterback. Between 1967 and 74, which is a long period of time, he had a 7.9 YPA, which was number one in the NFL. And as far as his ability to win games in that span, I think he was like 44-31-1 with the Jets. And that was an expected 4 wins in a 14 game season over his Jets injury replacements at quarterbacks in that span.
Wow.
So when you're a 4 win player, like,
Sure.
you got to put some respect on that name.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting that you know all that the Namath trivia because I know you're a Bills fan.
There
So
you
it's
go.
really
Yeah,
crazy. Oh, no, you're a
there you
Jets
go.
fan. That's right. All right, so basketball. Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh my God. Like I said, and I could go on all day with Wilt's stats, but the guy probably averaged 10 blocks a game. The only 112 games where records were kept late in his career when he was
Yeah.
age 34 and 35, he averaged 8.8 blocks per game. He once blocked Kareem 6 times in one quarter, 2 times on one possession, both
Wow.
skyhooks. So, and this is when he was 35.
Man.
So, I mean, the guy is just insane. Like, he averaged, everybody knows he averaged 50 points in a season, 27 rebounds, played more minutes per game than there were minutes in a game because of overtime that season.
Yeah.
And he had a 62.28 rebound game against Bill Russell. So, and 43 rebounds in a game against Russell. So you can't
Wow.
say that he only did it against,
Sure.
electricians and plumbers.
Right, right, right. So you mentioned the 73 tops for Wilt Chamberlain. You say you can get it in near mint 7 for about $100.
Yes, which is like I bought at the top of the basketball market during the pandemic some of these cards, and a lot of times it's not who you buy, it's when you buy,
Mm.
and that was a bad time to buy. I did turn around some cards that I bought before the pandemic that I just didn't think were going to hold their value to the extent that they did, and I made a killing on those cards and traded basically into vintage baseball with that money, which was smart. But still, I love basketball. I love the vintage basketball cards. I don't care if I overpaid. Like I don't think
Yeah.
if you buy these cards at their peak value, like during a bubble, like you're going to probably lose money. But at any other time, these are the safest investments you can find.
Mm. And yeah, and you mentioned for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, same thing as 73 tops, near mint 7 for about 100
Which
bucks.
has Chamberlain in the background.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
that's
Wow,
that's
nice.
that's cool because
The
it's like the
Chamberlain
greatest
shadow.
sports rivalry maybe ever, like in terms of heavyweights. And when those guys are going toe to toe, how do you get better than Wilt Chamberlain versus Kareem?
Yeah, I'd think Bill Russell and Chamberlain, and then he handed the mantle over to
Right.
Kareem. Yeah, that makes sense.
But
And
what I
it's
mean is
interesting.
Russell was like 6'9", 6'10". Always felt like, it was a little bit of a David versus Goliath thing, where Kareem was actually taller than
Oh
Wilt.
yeah, interesting. And he had the skyhook, so he's even taller. But yeah,
Yep.
so it's interesting with when you talk about 73 tops basketball, especially for two players now. Kareem came out in six, or he was a rookie in '69, so that doesn't really affect this. But knowing that Tops came out with cards in '69, and there was a void between '69 and '63, so Chamberlain lost 6 years of cards, and then before
Yes.
'63 it was 57, I think.
57. So yeah, so
So there's another.
basically 57 is basically like everybody's a rookie.
Right.
60, the 69-70 set, most players are rookies or it's their second card. It's Wilt's second card, for example.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but then there was a run where, Topps issued baseball for the rest of Chamberlain's career. So he's got the 69, 70, 70, 71, 72, 73, and the 74 card with the Conquistadors, who he never played
Conquistadors.
for, which has all of his stats on the back, which I also love. Which you can get in an 8 centered for $150. Like, oh my God, would I run out and buy every one of the cards that I would find for that price right now?
I'm a huge 1972 Tops fan. The colors, the angles, I just something about that 72.
That's a great card too. Yeah,
And they were on something. Tops was on something with the basketball and the baseball. I'm trying to think of what the football was. Was that the colored borders like Terry Bradshaw, or was that
No, that was
Staubach's?
71.
So
So in
Staubach's.
71, Topps did the baseball and football are, demon sets for set collectors and even
Because
anybody
of the
who buys
coloring
vintage
or
cards of that era because
colored
of the
borders.
color black and all
Yeah.
different colors for the
Right,
football,
right.
which is why the 71 Namath, that's like $1,000 card. And
Wow.
in the condition, if you want it in an 8, you have to be prepared. Like maybe you'll find one for 1,000.
Yeah.
Probably like 1,200 is safer, but there's no way that card is going to lose value because there's like 15 of them that
Yeah.
are going to be in a higher grade if you get that one.
That's cool. That's awesome. All right. So let's recap a few of your favorite cards you have in your PC. Maybe not necessarily your favorite like your Mets, but what are your favorite vintage cards, period, that you have?
Well, I have do you want me to get them or do you want me to?
Yeah, we could pause this and then you can grab them. That's cool.
Yeah, okay. Here, or I could just go over one at a time. I have my cards are kept in binders
Which blows me away.
where like one whole binder is Mickey Mantle, one whole binder is Willie
Wow.
Mays. So this is just like my Willie Mays binder. Like
Holy smokes.
everything in here is Willie Mays. So I have during the beginning part of the pandemic, I bought well, I'll just take this page out. It's easier. I bought the 52 tops maze.
Awesome.
Okay, see, and
Yeah.
and there's the 52 Bowman.
Bowman. Yep.
And that was like super cheap when I bought it.
Goodness.
Just
Wow.
before, I think it was during the pandemic. I think it was like $600.
Wow. Holy
Um,
smokes.
the 53 Mays was like, I think I paid 690 for that back when there was no tax on eBay. And then the 54 is just a raw one that I bought. Uh,
So when you're saying you kept them in binders, I was like, the inside of me was like, oh, binders, but graded card binders. I see. I'm explaining
well,
for
yeah, the four packs,
I'm
so they
explaining for
could.
our podcast listeners that these are great, the graded card binders, which are
Well,
awesome. That's cool. That's I like that a lot.
I also put the top loaders in the four packs too.
Yeah,
So
I got you. But in other words, it's not like our old from the 1989 binders.
yeah,
That's your
that's yeah,
article.
exactly. It's not
That's
that's the
awesome.
article. So I
Oh,
put
very
that
cool. You should
on
have
my
kept your
mantle
Mickey. It says nice.
on my mantle binder. So the card that I like here the best of all my mantles, and I have all of them except for the ones that are just like impossible.
Sure.
I don't have the rookie or the 52 tops.
Yeah.
Um, but this is a tops buck that I could never like. I had to create a way to actually put it in the binder. Sorry.
No, it's all right. So
Yeah.
you have a maze binder, a mantle binder, and he didn't have too many cards because I guess he did have a bunch, but
Oh yeah,
he stopped before Maze
he's
and
got a
Aaron.
zillion cards. So this is my favorite mantle. It's not in the order of the cards because it's a like an oddball. So that's the Red Heart Raw. If you
Red
look at
Heart.
those
Huh.
corners,
What year is that?
Red Heart dog food, 1954.
Okay.
So if you bought enough cans of dog food, you would send in a coupon and you
What?
would get they would send you a Mickey Mantle card. And it's a
Oh,
beautiful card. And this is like pretty high grade. I don't get it graded because to me it's just an expense. I'm not going to sell it.
yeah.
And uh, I bought the card for $650. It's
Wow.
probably going to grade like a six. It's probably like a $3,000 card. So they're going to
Yeah.
bang me for like, you know,
Oh yeah.
uh,
$100, $125, something like that.
200, 300. Like who
Wow.
knows what they would bang me for? Like maybe it's
Yeah.
even a 6.5 or a 7. So, but if I'm not going to sell it, like I know
That's a
the
good point.
cards, you know. So,
Good point. My thing is I grade so it's easier if and when I die for my wife to sell them or whoever gets these cards. Obviously my wife to sell them. Less friction for, but I get from your perspective like that card's a valuable card. Period. Like
yeah, and the thing is, like, I have like a whole spreadsheet with
oh,
pictures
there you go. Oh, cool.
and everything itemized because I'm like, this is like who
Yeah,
I am.
that's a
So I,
professional right there, folks.
yeah,
You
so
know
I
what
mean,
you're
it's
doing.
probably stupid to go to that extent, but that's what I do.
I don't think so. Yeah,
And
no, that's pretty smart.
but the thing is, when as far as as far as an estate
Yeah,
giving, like, if you were to pass away, like my whole card collection,
yeah.
the survivor, the person who inherits them has a year to sell them at no cost basis because the IRS doesn't expect you to know what the
Oh,
person paid for the
wow.
card. So basically, you have a year to sell the card and they assume that the value of the card when you got them was what you sold them for. So there's no taxes due.
What? Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Holy cow.
that's
That's a really
true.
nice tip right there.
I worked
That's
for
great.
I, I worked for Price Waterhouse. I did,
Wow. Oh,
actually.
man. Very cool.
Not in accounting, but in communications. But still,
That is really cool.
I wrote about that stuff.
Wow.
Um, and then, I have a million cards.
You
I
got it.
have
We're gonna have you on again at some
Clemente. I
point, if you
have,
don't mind. We're gonna have you back on at
yeah,
some point.
I
So
got,
let me
I
go ahead.
have the one thing I do have a Quaker Oats Babe Ruth
What?
PSA 8, like you're the Babe Ruth Club member. So I'm a member of the Babe Ruth Club. It comes in a little pin holder. It's let me see if I could pull it out here.
That's cool. I've never even heard of such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I overpaid at the time, but I didn't care because it was kind of like it seemed like it should be worth more money. And then every time I felt that way, it's gone up.
Uh-huh.
So that's the Babe Ruth Club.
Oh man,
So,
that's neat.
That's the only Babe Ruth thing that I have.
I was
So,
happy with my 1976 all-time All-Stars Babe Ruth. That's the only thing I got.
well,
Ungraded.
the 73 card is a good thing to get. The home run leaders.
Yeah, that's a cool one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have that one. It's just a beat up card that I had from when my brothers collected that one. So
Yeah, and high grade, like in an eight, that's like a $400 card now.
wow. Oh yeah. That's cool. Michael, let me ask you. So what is going on in the Michael Salfino world? What can are you you're still writing for the Athletic, obviously. You have this article that's coming out. We don't know when, but we know it's coming out soon. You write fantasy baseball right now with the Athletic and New York
Yeah,
Times,
I
right?
focus mostly on analytics with baseball. Football, I have a little bit more leeway where, I do a scouting notebook, which is
Oh, gotcha.
more sort of personality driven, but then I also do a market share report, which basically is a usage data
Okay.
and sort of projections based on that.
Gotcha.
And then I do some of the gambling stuff because there's such an overlap between player projections and
Oh,
gambling
interesting.
for the athletic.
Gotcha.
And I also do the collectibles, obviously, for the athletic as well, in
Cool.
addition to the stuff for tops.
Where can we find just social media wise?
I'm at Blue Sky and at Twitter at Michael Salfino.
At Michael Salfino. Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much
Um,
for coming on. I appreciate you reaching out initially to talk about the Dandy Dozen, and I appreciate your Elite Eight that you shared. So that was awesome.
yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate it, man. I thanks for coming on. Like I said, we'll have you on again sometime. And you seem to be someone who, like I tell our listeners all the time, to just make sure you have a happy hobby. You seem to enjoy the hobby,
Yes,
so that's
definitely
awesome.
do. It's been very fulfilling to, for somebody who appreciates sports history. I think that that's pretty much the vintage collector. So I've been this way my whole life and it'll never change. It's great to love something that, when you're my age, that you loved when you were seven.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Very few things did we love back then that we still love.
Yeah.
Lickamade.
Nothing else
I
that
don't
I could
like
think of.
Lickamade now. I wasn't, those candies where you stick the thing in and lick the powder.
Maybe pizza.
Pizza's good. Pizza's good.
Yeah.
All right, Michael. Thank you very much for coming
Okay.
on. I appreciate it.
My
Thanks a lot.
pleasure, man.